All right, so before we get into the psychology of transformations and constructing your offer specifically, we have to talk about something much bigger and much more important. I'm talking about the fact that identity has an extremely powerful impact on human behavior. And if you don't acknowledge that, then you're going to miss a lot, because identity is stronger than logic. It's stronger than emotion. It's stronger than desires, motivation, pain, or pleasure, because identity is the underlying operating system that actually drives how we carry out our activity when we act on motivation, pleasure, logic, emotion, etc. But let's make it clear. What does this look like? Well, think about the person that's in a relationship and logically they know they don't need to be in that relationship. Emotionally, they even feel they don't need to be in that relationship. They want to be away. They want relief from that, yet they're still there. What do we often find in those moments? That person feels like they don't deserve to have a better position, to be outside of that relationship. Nobody else will want me. They might even have somebody in that relationship telling them, hey, nobody's going to love you like I love you. Or they might be saying, I'm loyal. I don't give up on people. This person needs me. There's all type of identity that still drives people to go against that logic and emotion, even at the cost of their own well-being. Another example, when talking to one of my friends, she talks about how she has this problem pleasing everybody else, taking care of everybody else, even at her own expense, where she needs to set more boundaries. She needs a break. She needs space from her children, from her husband, all of their responsibilities, yet still it becomes very hard for her to even communicate it because she doesn't want to let anybody down. She's the one who holds things together because her identity wins out over time. In psychology, we call this a caretaker identity. And that wins out no different than the man who refuses to ask for help, even though everything is falling apart. He's stressed. He can't take it anymore. He's up to here, yet I have to be a man. I should not need any help. Even worse, I should not communicate a need for help because that makes me less of a man. Solving every problem except the one that needs to be solved because of his identity. These things can be empowering. These things can be constricting. Either way it goes, it drives behavior, and it's important for you to understand this so you can understand how to speak to your buyer based on the identity that they currently have and based on the identity that they are trying to get to. But understand, I need to be able to tackle the things around that identity to be able to communicate with them correctly. We're going to be deeper on what this looks like here, why it works the way it does. And by the end of all of this, you will be able to not only construct a great offer, but make sure your offer is able to speak to the specific identity that your target customer has, because you'll be able to identify where they are, create messaging that connects to where they are, and again, signal that you can get them where they're trying to go. So let's talk about exactly what this looks like. 3 important things: pain, aspiration, identity. Aspiration and pain are the 2 primary pre-identity states. Now, what does that mean? Identity in this case, we're talking about the new identity, the desired identity. This is where I'm trying to get to. I want to become this person. Most offers, especially in the coaching consulting space, have to do with actually transforming an identity in some form or fashion, even if it seems like it's not directly for that purpose. There's some level of aspiration. I want to make more revenue, but I want to make more revenue to justify, validate something. There's a reason that I'm on this journey and willing to take this path in the first place. However, at the same time, you have to be able to speak to pains as well. And here's why. All right. These things exist on a spectrum. This is what most people miss. Most people, pretty much everybody has pain. Let's just be real. Some level of pain. And their aspirations are actually derivatives of 2 types of pain. You have the pain that you're trying to escape, and then you have the pain that you're trying to avoid, right? Escape is the most severe situation, right? I'm literally in pain. My hand is bleeding, my wrist is bleeding, and I'm trying to stop the bleeding, so I need to get it done now. This is one of the rare cases that your identity completely gets overwritten because you are not looking to be aligned with some level of principles of how you're trying to see yourself. You're simply just trying to get out the pain. So those are the most extreme scenarios. You're not usually serving that in this space if you're watching this course. This is not hospital, doctor, doing anything for a patient. Now, there are some levels of feeling like this if a business is really struggling and you can save them from that. But most cases, people are trying to avoid pain. And they're saying, hey, I don't want to get back to that place, right? Oftentimes, they're avoiding an extreme scenario in which they would believe they would have to escape from. So they're taking actions and they want an identity that they believe prevents them from experiencing the worst, right? So I don't just want to be rich or the type of person who is rich. I want to be rich because I have an awareness of what it's like to be poor, and I don't want to be that. The desire to make more money does not exist in a vacuum. The desire to be more fit, right, and work out does not exist in a vacuum. And we have to realize, again, on this spectrum, that pain is a root, but you might meet a customer in the pain state or aspiration state. Let me change markers. But they need two different types of messaging when they're in these places. You need to know where they are. But it's important to know what my pains were that got me to these aspirations. I don't need to hear pain messaging if I'm aspirational and I'm looking at identity, but it helps if you understood where your customer came from, because it lets your customer feel like you understand them that much deeper. He doesn't just know how to get me to where I want to go. He understands where I've been. He's my type of person. Something about them, they're speaking to me, right? That's what they feel. But again, obviously, if you're in the pain state or they're in this pain state, there's some messaging that speaks directly to that. You're speaking about relief in this moment in time right here, right? This is about relief. Now, these people aren't necessarily feeling pain if they're in the aspiration state because they're looking forward to the identity and they're looking for success, achievement. How can I get to the next level? So that language is different. If you speak to this person who's more in the aspirational state with a bunch of pain, they'll be turned off most of the time. Like, this sounds like struggle. I don't even want to go back there. I don't want to be in an environment where people are just talking about struggle when I'm trying to get to this next point in my identity. And emphasis on point of identity, because this rinses and repeats, right? These are the same core elements, but I might get to this point of identity and now I'm feeling some level of pain, or I'm at least starting to stack aspirations to gain more identity and more identity as I continue to graduate up the ladder of whatever that looks like for me personally. So this is the core thing that you need to be able to understand and analyze within your target customer. However, I'm going to take it deeper to really drive in what all this means, how this truly impacts human behavior. Because although you might not be talking to people in this next state that I'm going to get into, understanding that part of the spectrum is actually going to help all of this make a lot more sense. And that's when we talk about maximum achievement, when we talk about many people who are perceived to be rich, right? Financially, especially, because it's one of the clearest spaces and cases to understand the impacts of identity on an individual's behavior and their own personal desires. So imagine this. I've gone through pain, I've gotten my aspiration, and now I've achieved this new identity. I've done that multiple times, and then I've gotten to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what is that? It's, I know, like survival, belonging, esteem, and accolades, and then you have self-actualization, right? Now, the pain acts as fuel to get you through all of these stages. But then oftentimes we see a lot of odd behavior from people who get rich, right? And now they have more time. They've achieved so many things. They have the esteem and validation from other individuals. They don't have safety issues, survival issues. They feel belonging to some community oftentimes. So what's left? You have this self-actualization piece and behavior gets very weird. And in this case, we're going to use Will Smith as a case study, popular actor, artist, mostly because he's actually been very open and people haven't actually realized many of the things that he's revealed about himself in the case of identity, because you have to be looking out for these things at all time or already be aware. So one thing that he said before, I remember seeing this interview where he was talking about, hey, I'm rich, I know, but I still have this nagging thing in the back of my mind where I'm afraid of being broke. I'm still behaving in fear of being broke. You've heard some rich people actually reveal that, and it's kind of weird to hear that. However, this is what I call pain hangover, right? He's gone through the pain. He's far away from the pain. He probably even is inspired, right? And after he inspired, he achieved some level of identity through his accomplishment and got this money. However, now he has a pain hangover because the pain is still driving his behavior. This is why I talk about the aspiration is a derivative of the pain, and people decide to aspire multiple directions. It's different for different people in terms of how they react to their pain, but they create aspirations based on their pain, and then it takes a long time before they've achieved an escape velocity where pain is no longer the anchor. But that's usually where they're at some level of self-actualization. That's the next thing to address. And in Will Smith's case, it was even deeper because he was somebody who achieved, right? He got rich one time relative to his first time being rich, and then he went broke, like IRS bankruptcy or like all of those types of things. And then he got probably 10 times richer than he was that first time that he was rich and went broke, yet still he had double validation of this being a thing, because it's not just, oh, I've made money and I think there might be a risk of becoming broke. I've actually experienced being rich and then broke. So now I know this could be a real thing. These are the two things that anchor us: the extreme pain that we're trying to escape and the identity that we're trying to achieve. And by achieve, I don't necessarily mean the aspirational identity either, but simply how we see ourselves. So that's one case where you can see this conflict bubble up when you're looking at the extreme in terms of people being financially successful. These become good case studies to look at because it clarifies, since you get to isolate variables. Another crazy thing I saw him say was basically him sharing with another table of actors that he got broken up with by a girl, or maybe got cheated on, something like that. And he told himself he was going to be the biggest movie star in the world, so nobody would ever do that to him again. He built this whole achievement of identity out of the pain of feeling some level of broken heart. And as you can see, directionally, that entire path is built from a state of pain. So if you think about your clients, it's not just, hey, why do you want this identity? But when you are able to understand them enough where you know where they're coming from, why they want that identity, there's subtle ways that you can speak to that part that they don't even want to address anymore, right? Because again, these aspirational people, they don't want you to lead with the pain, but they do know it's there. They do want to continue to avoid it. They oftentimes are thinking, I don't want to go back to where I came from, whatever that pain is. And I'm talking about money, but again, this hits every single category, every single type of pain, whether you're helping people with working out, whether you're helping people with relationships, whether you're helping people become more disciplined, become more spiritual, whatever your offer is, you're going to identify what state they're in, this one or that one, and then you need to know what this is. Now let's get back to this last piece of identity. I talked about the rich. Again, just because it's a very simplistic way to think about identity and achievement. When you get rich and you have all of these other things handled because you took a path that allowed you to achieve these things, oftentimes you hear wealthy struggle. And people don't want to acknowledge this a lot of times because we have this weird struggle in society. It's understandable when you might not want to hear about certain struggles from the rich, but however, we all deep down know money is not everything. Therefore, getting money does not remove somebody's humanity, and the roots of what we go through as humans are the pains and the identity. But what happens when I go through all these levels and now I can no longer be fueled by pain? Pain is so powerful, whether it's insecurity, frustration, suffering, loss, whatever the pain was, it got me through these stages. I achieved. But once you're here, that fuel does not work anymore. It's like going from gas, right? And now this is electric. I don't know how to operate here. I haven't been here before. I've never had to use electric. And the reason this is important is because a lot of times we see people self-sabotage when they're up here. They fall into addiction. They fall into depression. You hear people say, I have so many rich friends, and the friends aren't all that happy. You'll be surprised at how many people are rich and still depressed. But there's a reason why. A lot of times when you even see these people who work extremely hard and also are defined as depressed despite not actually having to work, is because it's easier and more familiar to keep doing the thing that I know how to do, make money, than it is to actually face the new hard that is self-actualization. Because it needs a new fuel. We're at electric now. We're not using gas, we're using electric. And the GPS isn't so clear up here because it's all internal, right? When I'm going away from a pain, it gives me a very clear direction or clear options at least to avoid that pain. But if I'm dealing off of something internal, you hear people get all woo-woo and now they're chasing purpose and all of these other things. But there's a reason why, and that is a new horror. The biggest pain that gets felt, unfortunately, a lot of times at that level is the transition into the pursuit of self-actualization. And a lot of people get down. This is why you see somebody like Alex Hormozy joke about it quite a bit, but he also means it seriously and people miss it. And if you don't know who Alex Hormozy is, he's like a popular business consultant, advisor, investor, etc. But he oftentimes uses this statement: how to get so rich that you question the meaning of making money in the first place, or that you question the purpose of life, or that you question the purpose of money. And he's not saying that completely tongue in cheek. If you've seen him speak enough, he's actually gone through that experience. That is when you get to the escape velocity where you can no longer say your activity is completely derived from the pain and the things of this level. It becomes what's next. You're at a dead end. You see artists all the time fall off of this mountain. That's what Will Smith calls it. Again, he's revealed in his own conversations a lot of these moments. But to be clear, again, I don't say these things from a sense of being abstract. I mean it from a studied sense of what drives behavior, and that you can truly see how people act as a result and why that's so important for you to understand from a general standpoint. You don't have to go as deep as I have to go to for all of the things that I advise, but hopefully having a sense of the full spectrum helps you understand that identity does dictate behavior. Identity does determine why somebody says yes and why they say no. And it shapes what somebody even believes is possible for themselves in the first place, which is extremely important for you to understand because there are gaps. If there's a gap that is too big between what they believe they can do and what you're offering, it's a wrap. The opportunity is missed. I'll even share a couple of personal business experiences where I came face to face with these lessons along the way. But at the core of things, this is the real battlefield. Identity is the real battlefield. And some of our most personal, frustrating, excruciating, painstaking moments in life have been when our logic and emotion say go one way, but our identity wants to go the other. So if your offer doesn't speak to somebody's identity or help them transform their identity, your offer might sell, but it will not scale.